Hello, Waterloo Region. You're listening to Meet the Candidate on CKMS-FM 102.7 Radio Waterloo. My name is Bob Jonkman. In this episode, we meet Jamie Hari, an independent candidate for Waterloo. In Meet the Candidate, Radio Waterloo provides 25 minutes of free airtime to the Waterloo Region candidates running in the 2025 federal election. This is not an interview, but 25 minutes of unstructured time. Candidates could tell you about their platform, local Waterloo Region issues they'll be tackling, why they're running, or what they do outside of politics. Note that the views expressed are not necessarily those of the Radio Waterloo Board of Directors, volunteers, sponsors, or advertisers. Now let's meet the candidate, Jamie Hari, and he's accompanied by Kaden.
Thank you very much for having me, Bob. Appreciate you, and appreciate you for joining me, Kaden.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm Kaden, and I'll be asking my father a couple of questions today. If you could please begin by introducing yourself and your party.
Thank you very much. So as Kaden pointed out, my son is here with me today, and we're looking to explain not only why I'm running as an individual, but what we're running for, and I'll tell you a little bit about that over the coming 25 minutes. So my name is Jamie Hari. I've been living in Waterloo for about 20 years now. I was born and raised in Brantford, just a little south of here, and I came up to the city for university, actually. I started at Laurier, ended up moving over to University of Waterloo, switching into computer science, which is my background. I am a computer science expert by trade. I spent years in software, but recently in the last decade or so, mostly in cybersecurity. About me, I'm a technology leader. I'm someone who spends a lot of time working with advanced technology and security. But I think what has really brought me into politics is the fact that everything is changing in such a way that it's unpredictable, and I don't see myself reflected in any of the existing parties. So I decided to run as an independent in this election. And through this election, sort of putting up my platform and reaching out to other folks, I discovered that there are a lot of folks out there who are also interested in running as candidates, also didn't see themselves in the established parties, whether that's Green, NDP, Liberal, or otherwise. And so I'll explain we're actually a number of independent candidates that in the next election will be coming forward to form a new party called the Revolution Party of Canada, and we intend to run a full slate of 343 candidates in the next election. It's funny, just before I move on, one of the ads that was just playing just before we jumped on was for foodsecuritynow.ca, and that kind of goes back to the whole reason why I'm running. They indicated a statistic of 1 in 4 Canadians currently faces food insecurity, and you look at all of the plans from the NDP, the Greens, and the Liberals, and certainly not the Conservatives, but they don't really have a full plan to tackle that, and so that's the reason why I'm running. Thank you for that question, Kaden. What's the next question?
Well, that actually leads me on to my next question for what is your top issue for your campaign and why?
And why? So the top issue, I would say, is electoral reform, and the reason for that is severalfold. It's a little bit selfish insofar as an independent candidate and someone who's in the process of joining with others to form a new political party. The current first-past-the-post system is a little bit rigged, quite frankly. It's very much designed in favor of the existing establishment parties, which is to say the Liberals and the Conservatives. And if you need any further proof, I mean, we've had more than 150 years of elections, and they've only ever resulted in 2 outcomes, red or blue. Despite all these great chances that the NDP have especially had, they've never been able to form power, and that's not because they're not a good party or they didn't try hard enough, or it's the system. It's rigged. So I always like to point to Fair Vote Canada, which is a group that advocates for electoral reform. And they do a great job, and they explain all the different systems that are alternative options. Some of them include proportional representation, ranked choice, single transferable ballot, even direct democracy, which is to say allowing plebiscites, allowing voters to have a direct commentary on every single issue. And so regardless of which we move forward with, I think we've identified that the first past the post system is fundamentally flawed, and we need to do something about that. And we heard in 2015 Justin Trudeau promised that would be the last election under first past the post, and he was clearly looking to either break that promise or what have you, but 3 elections later he never did. And I'm personally quite disappointed in the NDP for not holding them to it. And we're seeing now the results of that, which is to say the polls are low for the NDP, but more importantly than that, they're not going to get nearly as many seats as they would have otherwise got in a proportional representation system. So I think, quite frankly, NDP not forcing that issue have basically shot themselves in the foot. More data points on that particular issue of electoral reform. We just had the Ontario election where Doug Ford was the winner. But if you look at the results, it was very interesting. Everyone kind of got a disproportionate amount, all parties. So if you look at the NDP, they got twice as many seats as the Liberals with half as many votes. And so that basically means a 4-to-1 voter efficiency ratio. And that must not feel good for all those folks who voted Liberal and live in ridings where, the outcome was somewhat predetermined, but their vote only counted a quarter of what someone living in a different ridings vote counted in terms of for the NDP. And those were both the losing teams. And then you look at the Conservatives, who got about, I think it was 43 or so % in the election, and they got 100% of the power because they formed a majority government, which means they can push through a lot of legislative action with little to no resistance. So when you look at all the small parties, whether it's even the PPC or the Animal Protection Party, who, by the way, is a fantastic party, and if you not familiar with them, you should absolutely check them out. Liz White and I had a great conversation when I was getting started in this, and I just wanted to ask how small parties tended to fare and what they were pushing for. And as you can imagine, the Animal Protection Party talked a lot about the protection of animals, but they also very much believed that the electoral system was not fair, and not fair to them in the same way it wasn't fair to the Greens or the PPC. And so, irrespective of your political leanings, I think we can all agree that the system could be improved. And if we want democracy that doesn't tend towards a duopoly like we see in America with the two-party system, then we need to make that change immediately. And so, certainly if you haven't checked them out, go look at fairvote.ca. They're a great organization that has a ton of information, research, and policy alternative data that you can look at. The idea of electoral reform has a couple of benefits. It not only allows existing parties to small existing parties to have a more proportionally sized voice, but it also allows new parties like the party I'm working with, the Revolution Party of Canada, to add their voice to the mix and have an opportunity to, just like this radio station has done for us, have a voice that's represented and a new approach that we can present. So I think if you look at all of that, and even Elizabeth May, who recently, I think it was maybe 3 weeks ago, a month ago, announced something to the idea of a green coalition where all the small parties would strategically place or not place candidates in order to ensure either a minority government, so that's to say the Liberals don't get more than 172 seats, or at least they get a closer to fair representation. What we've seen just yesterday, or I think it was the day before, was that the Debate Council, the National Debate Council, actually withdrew their invitation to the Green Party to participate in last night's national debates. And it was not because they aren't a popular party or don't deserve a voice, but because they didn't meet the technical rules, which are you need 4% to poll at 4%, have an elected member, one or more elected members seated, and running candidates in 90% of the ridings. But the Greens decided not to run a full slate, and that came back to bite them. And I don't think that's fair, quite frankly. And I really regret not having Jonathan at that debate last night to bring his voice forward. So I guess to wrap it up, I think electoral reform is underpinning all other issues because whether we're talking about food or shelter or foreign policy or military or anything else, I think having representation of the electorate represented in Parliament is the only way that we're going to make decisions that satisfy, or as close to satisfy, Canadians' wishes. I guess my call to action for everyone out there who's listening, talk to your candidates, not just me, but certainly every color, every party. Certainly ask them if they're committed to electoral reform, and that this will be the final first past the post, and hold them to it, and say, look, my vote is contingent on you, agreeing that we need a more fair electoral system. Great question, Kaden. Thank you. What's the next one?
Thank you. So my second question is, what's your second biggest issue? I know you're not a single issue party, so what's your second biggest priority for your party?
It's a bit of a twofer, to be honest. So as Kaden pointed out, thank you, that the Revolution Party actually has three priorities. One is electoral reform, and the other two are very closely linked. It's sort of the two halves of the same coin. We believe that food, water, shelter, and a livable environment are human rights. And most often the main question that comes back is, how are you going to pay for all that? How are you going to pay for expanded social programs? And the answer is very simply to eat the rich. We would introduce a whole slate of new tax policies very targeted towards the 0.01% of Canadians. So not to say, the conventional 99%, 1%. We think that the problem doesn't necessarily lie in someone who makes $200,000, $300,000, maybe $400,000 a year. It's the folks who make $200,000 a day. And so one of the sort of keystone policies in that I would propose, and that the Revolution Party would propose, is an scaling annual wealth tax. And so the scaling part is important, but let's start on what an annual wealth tax is. So the basic concept is that rather than calculating based on how much money you've earned either through working, like income tax, or through sale of assets, like capital gains, it instead takes a tally of how much net wealth, not net worth, net wealth that you've accumulated. And once you've calculated that, a percentage of that would be taxable. So for folks, let's say, that have $100 million, it might be 1%. So they would owe $1 million in tax, in addition to any capital gains or income tax. But the scaling part is where it becomes really interesting and important. Is if you have $1 billion, that's certainly a more significant number, and that might be as high as 10% annual. So if you had $1 billion, your tax bill could be $100 million per year. Now, as your net wealth comes down, your tax rate would equally come down that sliding scale. So the idea isn't to penalize those people forever, but really to flatten out the wealth inequality, which is just absolutely exponentially, and I do mean that literally, exponentially grown in the last couple of years. So, we put that together and say, if you've got a small, modest inheritance, maybe $1 million, whether it's a small family farm or a small business or just your RRSP and your home, that's not what we're looking to talk about. We would set the minimum bar for an annual wealth tax to be high enough that it's not going to affect those modest inheritances or anyone, who might have a lot of capital by way of being a farmer, for example. The next sort of point that I think a lot of people raise whenever we talk about really aggressive tax policies like a scaling annual wealth tax is, well, what happens when they leave? The idea, the myth, quite frankly, of wealth flight is perpetuated by the ultra wealthy, and it's because they want to make us scared that if we do implement those policies, that they'll just take their ball and go home. They'll go to a Cayman Islands and they'll put their money in an offshore account and get it where it can't be accessed. And then what do? Then you've lost your capital investment and you don't get that tax revenue. So the answer to that is a couple of things. The first is wealth flight legislation, which would make that illegal, a criminal act, and certainly it's effectively tax evasion. And so we would leverage all the power and international cooperation that we could to bring that to bear. So that looks like issuing international arrest warrants and extraditing those people back to Canada. We'll give a specific example. So imagine Galen Weston, who is obviously not super popular and hasn't been for many years. I've talked about this to many folks I've met in Waterloo and beyond, and they say, okay, well, so what happens if Galen Weston, who has a literal castle in the UK, what if he just never comes back and he just, operates everything from over there? Well, a couple of things, aside from, again, the arrest warrants, we would just nationalize. If he doesn't want to pay his fair share, we would nationalize his infrastructure that he has here in Canada. It would be very difficult for Galen Weston to pick up his Shoppers Drug Marts and his Loblaws and carry them in his suitcase over to the UK or to the Cayman Islands. We would simply seize his assets in forfeiture of not paying those annual wealth tax bills. So I think the excuse of wealth flight and but what if, those are really non-issues when we look at the full suite of policy. One of the other interesting sort of statistics that I've seen that we see in both America and Canada, certainly more exaggerated there, is the revenue agency down there, the IRS, here, of course, the Canada Revenue Agency, and the amount of money that we as a public invest in that service and the returns on that. Some of the more recent statistics are somewhere to the effect of, for every dollar that we put into CRA for investigating high net worth individuals and tax avoidance, it comes back between $12 to $16. So again, every dollar we put in, we get $12 to $16 back from the ultra wealthy who have been avoiding taxes or otherwise playing games to reduce their tax burden and not be fair contributors to society. So we would direct the CRA to focus their efforts there. I mean, I don't know if you've personally ever been through an audit. It's not a super pleasant experience, but generally speaking, it's not as complex as it would be if you own corporations and so forth. And so we should do things to make the tax filing for everyday, Canadians so much easier. So we would also implement simple automated tax filing. And there's a whole lobby by companies like Intuit who does TurboTax and all those various things. They don't want that because, or H&R Block and all those other companies, because that's their bread and butter. And so if we were to take, some percentage of Canadians who have a very simple tax T4, they have a single T4 from a single company and they don't have any special investments or any special deductions, for all of those folks just automatically filing and giving them their refund quickly and not requiring they go out to spend $100 or whatever it is now at H&R Block. All of that can be done to save Canadians money investing in CRA and allowing those CRA resources to focus on the ultra high net worth individuals that are effectively dodging taxes. So you put all that together and we can certainly do a lot better. Speaking of the ways that ultra high net worth individuals escape tax, we've seen the capital gains inclusion rate bounce like a rubber ball over the last couple of months. First with the announcement that the Liberals would increase it, and now that they've put it back down, at effectively kowtowing to the Conservative request or demand for that. And the answer is very obvious as to why that is it's effectively a tax loophole where if you work for a living, which is to say put your time and energy into the job, you pay 100%, your tax is on 100% of what you earn. But if you inherited your money and you sit on your butt, you're actually 50% tax-free right out of the gate. That's absolutely unfair. It's undemocratic. It's unethical. There's a lot of things else I could say that I won't on the radio. But I think we need to increase that to 100%. It's only fair that no matter how you earn your money, that it be included in what's considered taxable. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't mean there can't be tax exclusions and tax write-offs, especially for folks who run small farms or small businesses. That would impact them as well. But I think what we're really looking to do is focus on the ultra high net worth individuals who take advantage of that regularly. I think the statistic is something to the effect that 1 in 6 Canadians benefit from capital gains exclusions in their entire lifetime, and an even smaller amount on an annual basis. So really increasing that is not going to impact the vast majority of people, and the fact that we were debating it at all seems a little disingenuous, quite frankly. Some of the other things that we want to talk about, I think the Liberals did introduce another tax bracket, and we need to go a little bit further because we have seen a lot of salaries and payouts increase, where it used to be $100,000 was a big deal. Now we see people making $500,000, $1 million a year, and we need to appropriately tax them as well. If you look back in the sort of the golden era of America and then the post-war era, we saw effective tax rates combined as high as 90% above $1 million, or the time equivalent of $1 million. And so we need to return to that. I mean, what did that tax rate do? It funded the the space program, the interstate system, and all of those things in America, and all the things that America claims were their sort of high achievements. And we did a lot of that here in Canada too. And every time we tax the ultra wealthy and reinvest that money in infrastructure, we see GDP and all the other capitalist sort of metrics go up. It's not just about taxing the wealthy; it's about building a stronger economy, but doing so from the bottom. I think the idea of trickle-down economics or whatever, Nixon and back in those days, and Reagan, it's always a lie. They always say if you give more tax breaks to the billionaires, they're going to create more jobs. And you see that same story. Maybe it's called trickle-down economics. Maybe it's called something else. But every time we see evidence that is not the case. We see it increases wealth inequality and has detrimental effects to things like inflation, your ability to pay for food and rent. So you put all that together and say we would absolutely increase the income tax, the capital gains rate inclusion, and then add a scaling wealth tax. But that's not the entire package. We also want to make all fines and fees means tested. So I can't recall the country right now. It's a Nordic country. And I remember a story from, I think it was a decade ago or so, where a hockey player in the NHL was returned to their home country there for a visit or vacation or what have you. And they got a speeding ticket. But because over there the speeding tickets were based on your means, and the hockey player made millions of dollars a year, it was like a $50,000 speeding ticket. And that sounds a little ridiculous, but when you think about it, someone who makes millions of dollars in Canada and pays a flat fee for speeding, and you don't get caught every time you speed, it's effectively a menu, a price list of rules you can break that if you just pay a price, you're allowed to do. And that's inappropriate. It's meant to be a punishment. It's meant to be a deterrent. And when it's not a deterrent, it ceases to be effective at all. And so that's why you see fancy companies going through. I think the last thing I wanted to touch on is the human needs or human rights. So in terms of what we would do with that money, we would make food, water, shelter, and a livable environment guaranteed. We'd add them to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, nationalize food banks to make sure that those shelves are never bare, and just cancel all contracts with companies like Nestle, making sure that there's no opportunity to extract profit through necessities of human needs. I think I'll close on that. Kaden, thank you very much for joining me. And Bob, thank you very much for having me.
You've been listening to Jamie Hari, an independent candidate for Waterloo on Meet the Candidate. He was accompanied by Kaden Hari. The views expressed were those of the candidate, not necessarily those of the Radio Waterloo Board of Directors, volunteers, sponsors, or advertisers. All Waterloo Region candidates were invited to meet the candidate, but some candidates have declined to appear on the radio and some have not responded at all. Remember, the election is on Monday, the 28th of April. Show notes, podcast, and video will be available shortly on the Radio Waterloo website at radiowaterloo.ca/MTC. The show is produced by me, Bob Jonkman, in the studios of CKMS-FM. The theme music is Falling Sky by Jason Shaw of Audionautics.com and used under Creative Commons Attribution Only 4.0 International License.